I'm going to introduce Louise Maryland, who is our representative for the Women's Foundation. She is the Vice President of Community Initiatives and Investments. She's dedicated to improving equity and educational opportunities so every person has freedom and choices. She helps guide the Foundation's research, policy, and grant-making strategies, and also collaborates with community partners to improve opportunities for girls and women to learn, prepare for career success, and ultimately achieve economic self-sufficiency. She will be presenting data, and afterwards, we're going to be having Nancy Hartley, who is an emeritus professor from CSU, moderate the panel with comments by three distinguished women researchers and/or practitioners who will comment on the data. And then we're going to open the floor for questions and answers, ending with some sense of actions to take for future policy initiatives as well as practice on the ground. Let me introduce to you Louise Maryland.
Thank you so much, Caridad, for your excellent work here at Colorado State. And thank you for the opportunity to partner with you to share what we've learned in our partnership with the Institute for Women's Policy Research. I want to thank all of you for being here tonight to learn with us and to also learn with our panelists here about how we can take what we are learning about the economic opportunities for women in Colorado to improve them. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Let's go ahead and talk about the Women's Foundation of Colorado. This organization I'm so proud to be a part of is dedicated to ensuring that every woman and girl in Colorado achieves her full potential. And in order to achieve this goal, we're working in several ways to make progress. First, by beginning with research. Research is the way that we know how best to dedicate our resources to ensure that we're moving in the right direction. We're utilizing that research then to inform our public policy efforts, which is a large part of what we're doing this evening. And our research also informs the investments we're making through community partnerships. And we're sharing what we're learning in events like this and community education efforts throughout the state of Colorado. Research informed the areas in which we focus our greatest efforts to improve opportunities for women and girls. In 2016, our efforts are primarily driving in the areas of improving economic security for low-income single mothers by ensuring that they have opportunities to advance their education and training and thus their career opportunities. We are also working to support girls in graduating from high school, prepared for success as they enter college at any level or as they move into their careers. And we're also working to improve learning and earning opportunities for women and girls in the fields of science, technology, engineering, and math, where they have the best opportunities to achieve economic security. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we released a report in October of 2015 in partnership with the Institute for Women's Policy Research. And this report takes a closer look at women's economic status in Colorado, trends over the past decade, and disparities among Colorado women by race and ethnicity. IWPR examined how women in Colorado are doing in two key areas: employment and earnings, and poverty and opportunity. And the data reveal for us areas which need further progress, and also includes recommendations that can help to achieve that progress. Now, you're all here to really learn what we saw in the data. There's a lot of it. I'm going to be reading to make sure that I get the details correct for you. So IWPR has developed an employment and earnings composite index that compares states' performance on 4 key component indicators of women's status in the area of employment and earnings. First, median annual earnings for women who work full-time and year-round, and the gender earnings ratio among full-time year-round workers. Third, women's labor force participation. And fourth, the percent of women employed and working in managerial or professional occupations. Colorado ranks 12th in the country on the employment and earnings composite, receiving a grade of B. And just for context, there were only 2 areas in the United States that received an A. the District of Columbia and Maryland and Massachusetts were close to the high score that DC achieved. Now, here in Colorado, we are ranked #1 in the Mountain West region. Let's take a closer look at those composite indicators on the Employment and Earnings Index. The median annual earnings for Colorado women working full-time and year-round in 2013 were $40,000. And this compares to a national average of $38,000, with the highest earnings, again, in the District of Columbia at $60,000 a year annually. Women working full-time and year-round earned 80 cents for every dollar men earned, compared to a national average of 79.2%. And 63% of women in Colorado participated in the labor force. And finally, about 43% of employed women in Colorado work in managerial or professional occupations. Now, for each indicator, Colorado is above the national averages for women. And since IWPR published the status of women in the states in 2004, progress in Colorado has been mixed. While the gender wage gap has narrowed from 75.9% to 80%, the median annual earnings for women have decreased slightly. So really, the wage gap here in Colorado closed because men's earnings decreased even more than women's, which matches the national trend, with men's earnings stagnant since the 1980s, while women's grew in the 1980s and 90s before flatlining in the early 2000s. Now, while women's labor force participation decreased slightly, the percentage of employed women in managerial and professional occupations increased by a little more than 6 percentage points. And also under good news, Colorado ranks 5th in the country for the percent of employed women working in STEM occupations at about 6%. Now, the progress being made here means that we are headed in the right direction to close the gender wage gap. And if progress continues at the current rate since 1960, women in Colorado working full-time, year-round, will not earn the same as men until 2057. That's 1 year before the nation as a whole, which is projected to close the wage gap in 2058, and over a century before the last state will see equal earnings. Our neighbor to the north, Wyoming, isn't projected to close the wage gap until 2159. In Colorado, as in the nation overall, women's earnings vary by race and ethnicity. White women have the highest median annual earnings at $43,000, followed by Asian and Pacific Islander women at $39,000. The two racial and ethnic groups with the lowest earnings are Hispanic women, who earn $30,000 annually, and Native American women, who earn $31,000. And when combining the effects of race and gender, the wage gap has significant economic consequences for the women of Colorado, especially for women of color. Hispanic and Native American women earn $25,000 less per year than white men, and Black women earn $19,000 per year less than their white male counterparts. One of the areas where women have made the most progress in recent decades is in post-secondary educational attainment, and education does increase women's earnings. But despite these gains, women in Colorado, as in the country overall, still earn much less than men at the same education levels, and often women earn less than men at the education level below them. As we can see, women with a high school diploma earn the same as men with less than a high school diploma. And at every level of educational attainment beyond that, women earn less than men with less education. Colorado women with graduate degrees earn less than a man with a bachelor's degree. Women with a bachelor's degree earn less than men with associate's degrees. And women with associate's degrees earn less than their male counterparts who've attended but not completed college. Colorado ranks 11th in the nation for the percentage of women in the labor force. About 63% of women over the age of 16 worked full or part-time or were actively looking for work. Women who identify as multiracial or with a racial or ethnic group other than those shown in the figure here have the highest labor force participation rate at almost 73%, which is nearly 10 percentage points higher than the average the average for all women, and the rate for the second highest group, white women. A little over half of Native American women, at 55.8%, are in the labor force. Women in Colorado are more than twice as likely as men to work part-time. 31% of employed women work part-time, compared with 16% of employed men. And among women who usually work part-time, over a quarter of them do so because of personal or family obligations, compared with only 5.4% of men. And 5.6% of women cite childcare problems, a rate 10 times higher than that of men, as the reason they work part-time. Now, we'll turn over to the second composite index included in the report, the Poverty and Opportunity Index. This compares states' performance on 4 indicators reflecting women's access to economic opportunity and security. The first of the 4 factors is the percent of women aged 18 to 64 who have health insurance. The second is the percent of women 25 or older with a bachelor's degree or higher. The third is the percent of women-owned businesses. And we round out with the fourth, the percent of women 18 and older above the poverty line. Colorado ranks 8th in the country on the Poverty and Opportunity Composite, receiving a grade of B-. And the District of Columbia received an A- for comparison, and only 2 states, Maryland and Massachusetts, received a higher grade at B+. Again, Colorado is ranked 1st in the Mountain West region. Now let's take a closer look. Here's where Colorado falls on each of those composite indicators. In 2013, the percent of non-elderly women in Colorado with health insurance was 83%. This compares to nationally an average of 81.5%. And 79.7% of Colorado men were insured. Over 1/3 of Colorado women have a bachelor's degree or higher, and Colorado ranks 4th in the nation on this indicator. Over 1/4 of businesses in Colorado were women-owned. And finally, while it's below the national average, 13.0% of Colorado women live in poverty, compared with 10% of men, and compared to a national average for women in poverty of 15.5%. Since the Status of Women in the States report compiled by the Institute for Women's Policy Research in 2004, Colorado women's progress in the area of poverty and opportunity has also been mixed. The percent of women aged 18 to 64 with health insurance grew by almost 1 percentage point between 2001-2 and 2013, which was before full implementation of the Affordable Care Act. And the percent of Colorado women with a bachelor's degree grew by 6.6 percentage points. Women's business ownership also increased by more than 1 percentage point, but the percentage of women in poverty increased by 3.4 percentage points, from less than 10% in 2001 and 2 to 13.0% in 2013. Now, we all know that health insurance is vital to well-being and economic security, but coverage rates vary widely by race and ethnicity. White, multiracial, Asian, and Black women in Colorado have coverage rates around 85%, while Hispanic and Native American women have health insurance coverage rates of 67% and 65% respectively. As we know, education increases earnings. That's why so many of us are here, connected with Colorado State University. And Colorado ranks quite high for the percent of women with bachelor's degrees or higher. This is an attractive state, we all know, that draws in talent as well as prepares our own students for success through higher education. But when comparing women in Colorado with women in the U.S. overall, we see that the percent of Colorado women with a bachelor's degree as a whole is quite higher than the national average for these reasons. What struck me when taking a close look at the differences by race and ethnicity is how very much higher the percentage of white women in Colorado with a BA is than the national average, at 43% for Colorado compared with 32.5% nationally. But also that the one group of Colorado women not higher than the national average is Hispanic women. You know, it's in the research that we identify some of these surprising trends, and it helps the Women's Foundation identify where we can focus our efforts for the greatest impact. Now, I don't think that anyone will be surprised to see that poverty rates also vary by race and ethnicity. The rates for Asian, white, and Native American Colorado women, all around 10 to 11%, are less than half the rates for Black and Hispanic women, which are closer to a quarter. Poverty also varies substantially by household type. single mother households in Colorado have the highest poverty rate at 36.5%. That represents more than 45,000 households with children under 18 living in poverty here in Colorado. By comparison, 17.5% of single women without children live in poverty. And this compares to a national poverty rate for childless women of 20.9%. Families increasingly depend on women's earnings to ensure their economic security, which we can see in the growing number of families with breadwinner mothers. These are either single mothers who are the head of household, irrespective of their earnings, or they are married mothers who earn at least 40% of a couple's joint earnings. Between 2011 and 2013, women were the co- or sole breadwinners in 45% of Colorado households with children under 18. Nearly half of those female breadwinners are single mothers. One of the most interesting parts of this report, in my mind, is the information on the gender wage gap. And it explored what would happen if that wage gap were closed. If all working women in Colorado, aged 18 and older, were paid the same as comparable men of the same age and level of education, who work the same number of hours and have the same urban or rural status, their earnings would increase by $7,224 annually, or almost 18%. And if you add that up across all working women in Colorado, this earnings increase amounts to an increase in the state's gross domestic product of $9.2 billion annually, or 3% of our state's entire GDP in 2014. And the impact on single mothers would be even greater, with an average annual earnings increase of $8,282, or 23%. And if working women in Colorado were paid the same as comparable men, their poverty rate would be cut in half. For families headed by single mothers, the poverty rate would fall by more than a third. And single women living independently of other family members would have their poverty rate reduced by 70%, from over 9% to less than 3%. And the poverty rate for married couples would be cut by almost half. Pay equity cannot wait. Now, the most exciting part of all of this research is that it yields recommendations for how to move forward, how to support progress in the areas we've identified the greatest needs. There are several recommendations that I'd like to take a few minutes to tell you about and connect it with the action the Women's Foundation and our partners across the state are taking. Now, we know that in many ways, women in Colorado fare relatively well. They continue to experience inequities that may prevent them from reaching their full potential. And the Women's Foundation never does research only to uncover problems, but really to point the direction for the solutions. So it's with that in mind, we share with you the recommendation that employers should be held accountable for gender and race disparities in hiring, compensation, and promotions. Contractors receiving public contracts should be required to review their pay and grading systems to ensure gender neutrality and that skills, effort, and responsibility are rewarded equitably. The Women's Foundation is proud to be a partner among a coalition of collaborators who've been working hard on a series of pay equity legislative measures that are working their way through the Colorado General Assembly during this 2016 session. We're pleased to say that progress has been made specifically on a bill that would require state contractors to make a commitment to pay equity before being able to receive an additional contract with the state. We think this is absolutely critical, as well as we believe our efforts to improve opportunities for women to advance in science, technology, engineering, and math, because it is in these fields that not only do they have higher earning potential than women working in non-STEM fields, but we also know they experience a narrower gender pay gap. Another recommendation from the report is that existing legislation related to workplace and educational equity and discrimination must be enforced, and new statutes that address barriers to equality, such as lack of work supports and the unequal treatment of part-time workers, should be developed. Policymakers should be educated about the important role that work supports, such as paid sick days, play in ensuring that women can participate fully in their local economies. For many years, the Women's Foundation of Colorado has been a partner in several organizations across the state who are working to ensure that child care subsidies are accessible, affordable, and deliver high-quality care options, especially for single mothers. And through our initiative focused on improving economic security for single mothers, the Women's Foundation invests in opportunities for women to advance their earnings through education and training, and access to child care is essential for this success. You'll hear more about some of these partnerships as we get into our panel discussion this evening. And through longstanding policy and research partnerships, which are also supported by the generosity of so many here in Northern Colorado who contribute to Women Give, a key partner to the Women's Foundation of Colorado, we've been able to invest in and advocate for policies that expand access to existing child care supports like the Colorado Child Care Assistance Program, or CCAP, and make it possible for women to maintain eligibility and participation in these programs as their earnings increase toward self-sufficiency. And through a long-standing commitment to this effort, in partnership with many collaborators across the state, I am proud to say that just in the last 2 weeks, Governor Hickenlooper signed into law a measure that will expand the opportunity for Colorado counties across the state to pilot programs that allow families with increasing earnings as they approach self-sufficiency to maintain their eligibility in the CCAP Child Care Subsidy Program until they are really ready to stand on their feet. This is tremendous progress we are very proud of and have been pleased to have an opportunity to play a role in, again, by doing the research, sharing it widely, and using it to influence policy opportunities for improvement. And the research continues. In 2014, the Women's Foundation partnered with Qualistar Colorado and the Colorado Children's Campaign to really more deeply understand the cost drivers and opportunities to improve affordability for childcare here in Colorado. And we're continuing an ongoing research partnership with Qualistar Colorado to better understand how to not only improve access, quality, and affordability for childcare, but how also we can work to improve the pay for those who are providing childcare services for families throughout the state. Another recommendation in this report is that in order to complete higher education, additional supports are needed for those who face financial and other barriers to completing a degree. Educational opportunities, especially for Hispanic, Native American, and Black women, should be a focus of investment, especially in scholarship and grant programs. And of course, at the Women's Foundation of Colorado, we recognize there are historic and systemic barriers that impact some women differently, and that fulfilling our mission for every woman and girl in Colorado to achieve her full potential, supports must be tailored to meet many different needs. And to improve equity and opportunity, academic achievement, educational attainment, and economic success, the Women's Foundation is investing in community partnerships that serve low-income women and girls of color through our Girls Graduate Initiative to help middle school and high school girls and their families remain engaged in their education so they will graduate from high school prepared for success in their next steps. Our Single Moms Initiative, which provides a full spectrum of support for single mothers to set them up for success as they pursue education and training to advance their earning potential. Our STEM initiative to inspire, prepare, and support girls and women on the path to economic security in STEM careers. And the Girls Leadership Council program that empowers high school girls to lead change in their communities. Another powerful recommendation from this report is to ensure that career advice for women and girls explicitly addresses the earnings potential of different fields of study and occupations. Increase opportunities for women to pursue careers in higher paying technical fields, and to monitor vocational and education and training programs to ensure that there is active outreach and support for women pursuing non-traditional careers. And by sharing information, including the facts in this research report, the Women's Foundation helps community partners throughout Colorado advise women and girls about careers that offer the highest earning potential. And through our STEM and Single Mom Succeeds initiatives, we're also ensuring that girls and women are inspired, motivated, and prepared to follow non-traditional career pathways. We're closing in here, the last two recommendations, and then we'll get the exciting discussion started. Thanks for hanging in there with me. The penultimate recommendation is to encourage local governments to adopt regional or county-level self-sufficiency standards, which assess the wages needed for a basic standard of living that includes all family expenses, such as child care and housing. Such measures would serve well as an income eligibility guideline for programs and policies designed to help families achieve economic self-sufficiency. Here in Colorado, the Colorado Center on Law and Policy recently updated our state's self-sufficiency standard that includes county-level data on the real cost of living in our state. The Women's Foundation provided support for statewide outreach about the self-sufficiency standard so that accurate, up-to-date information about the resources women need to support themselves and their families in communities throughout Colorado will be available to drive local and state-level policies, especially those regarding eligibility for work supports. And the final recommendation from this study is to ensure that federal, state, and local government contracts are accessible to women-owned businesses, and to make public and private sector investments in loan and entrepreneurial programs that expand small business opportunities for all. While the Women's Foundation isn't directly involved in women's entrepreneurship and government contracts, we are committed to ensuring that women and girls in Colorado are prepared for and have every opportunity to achieve success, including as entrepreneurs. Now, we really do want to thank our research partners in this study, the Institute for Women's Policy Research, and the community partners across the state who are delivering direct service programs and working so hard on the policy progress that our research is helping to drive forward. We appreciate your involvement in this effort as well, because it is by sharing this information and getting the message out about the greatest opportunities for improvement that we can take well-informed and very enthusiastic action to drive us forward towards the end goal of equity and opportunity for all of Colorado's women and girls. Thank you so much for being here tonight, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.